Haftarah review. This week we will be reviewing Haftarah Miquetz. Early Shabbat Shalom to everyone out there. And first and foremost, giving glory and honor to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one and only God, the true and living God, and unto him and him alone do we give glory. Giving due respect to the leader of our congregation, even Chief Prince Jeriel Ben Yissaschar, praying that the Most High God be with him, be with his family, his household, that the Most High God would protect them and keep them. Also, praying that the Creator be with Yisrael in the four corners of the earth, that the Most High God will continue to enlighten his people and guide us and bring us back to truth of self and to knowledge of self. So at this time, also I would like to introduce the teacher who's been going through all the different Haftarot, all the different portions that we have set aside to go along with the Torah. And that teacher is none other than Nasik, Zurishaddai ben Yehudah. And I'm proud to say that he's one of my teachers and also my mentor. I thank the Most High God for his life. At this time, I'll turn it over to you, Nasik. How are you?
Great, Baruch Hashem. First of all, I'd like to give praises to the Supreme Eternal Universe, God of my forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, and due respect to the platform on the D.C.B. platform, the spiritual leader, Chief Prince Jeriel Ben Yissaschar, and also to the host, Chief Uzziel, and to all the princes, chief brothers and sisters, rabbis, Kohanim, Maureen, greet you in the tongue of my forefathers, Shalom Aleichem. And this happened to be, since for those who may not know, I'm also be doing this program like on Sundays. So this happened to be a Rosh Chodesh going into the 10th month. And just in case I might forget later on, a few days from now, actually the 10th of this particular Rosh Chodesh is a traditional fast that people observe during the siege of the Babylonian period. So, which is mostly observed during the daytime. But first of all, I'd like to say, Adonai, Septai Titaku Piyagi Tilateka. Oh Lord, open down my lips, and my mouth should declare thy praise. I'll be going mostly dealing with the Haftarah that's used to go along with the day of Hanukkah, more so, which is normally that the Haftarah for Miquetz is normally the Book of Kings. I just want to touch on that briefly, but during a Shabbat, when Hanukkah, during one of the Shabbats, and during the time of Hanukkah, they usually have a different Haftarah to coincide with the season that they were observing, which would be coming from Zechariah, the 2nd chapter, the 14th verse, to 4th chapter, the 7th verse. But the normal Haftarah they do for Miquetz is in the Book of Kings, 1 Kings 1, 3, 15th verse, to the 4th chapter, 1st verse. But I'd like to go back over in the very Sidra Miquetz come from Genesis, the 41st chapter, 1st verse, to the 44th chapter, 17th verse. But I'd like to just go back over some of the things I spoke on. I think looking at the chats, I seen that maybe I make myself clear, and I know I wasn't trying to cover every detail on the Sidra prior to that, but which is YAH, I try to gloss over it somewhat. So maybe in glossing, I might have not made myself clear. But I like to focus on Tamar, who became actually a mother from the royal tribe of Yehudah. When I seen on the chat that they refer to as a harlot, a sister. Well, dealing with a harlot is not righteous. And I think, if I recall correctly, one brother answered, and 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 instead dealing with a harlot, which is not good at all, which is true. But I like to just point this out and going back over it, and it's best to read it, and then I will, hopefully answer the question clearer when I read the chapter, Genesis, the 38th chapter, picking up from the 15th verse. I just like to read a couple of things here. It says, when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, for she had covered her face. All right. Now, it didn't say she was. That's what he thought, because she covered her face. All right. So they called, he thought her to be that, which is still wrong for Yehudah to do that anyway, to go out looking for a harlot. But that's what he thought. And being a man, that's what he did. So we're not justifying it. I want to justify the woman herself, because she had took off her widow clothes there. And then after that, I would like to pick it up from the 19th verse. I mean, better before I even, better yet, I'd like to pick it up from the 18th verse. It says, and he said, what place shall I give thee? And she said, thy signet and thy cord and thy staff, that is in thy hand. And he gave them to her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, and put off her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. So thus far, she's not called that. But I'd like to bring out when the 21st verse, when Judah went to pick up his pledge. 21st verse says, when he sent the man out, he said, sent his friend out to ask to pick up his pledge. Then he asked the men of her place, saying, where is the harlot that was in Anaim by the wayside? And they said, there have been no harlot there. And he returned to Yehudah and said, I have not found her. And also the men of the place said, there had been no harlot there. Now the word they used there is Quadesha. Yehudah thought she was a Zonah. The men of the place didn't even put it in that level of Zonah. They put it in the level of Quadesha. A Quadesha got the same Shoish root as Quadosh, which is holy or sanctified, set aside. And some religious cults, it's like they have certain male or females put aside that if you become intimate with them, it's almost like a promotion to whatever deity they an opportunity and a blessing to whatever deity they worship. So that they notice they never call her a Zonah. A Zonah is actually a woman that's a lady of the night out there working, trying to make things happen. That's, we would call today like a prostitute. The men of the place had no concept of a prostitute being there. And they think the best they're going to be is somebody like a Quadesha, somebody you might assume to be a prostitute and everything like that. But you would have thought her to be a prostitute only because of the veil that she covered herself with. Whatever clothes she might have had, it's just a veil that he covered herself with. And then I'd like to just go a little bit further. And it said that 24th verse, and it came to pass after 3 months, after that, it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, had played the harlot, and moreover, behold, she is with child by harlotry. All right. Now they refer to her, as a Zonah again, only because after 3 months, she didn't tell nobody she had ever had a relationship. She kept it to herself. And then when they see after 3 months, she's starting to bulge out. So she knows she's pregnant. And so somebody says she had to step out and did something when she's supposed to have been chaste until Yehudah had given to his son, Shelah. And I just wanted to make that very clear in that area there, that even then she never told the people what happened. Yehudah had admitted that he messed with a harlot, didn't concern himself about whether the harlot gonna get pregnant or not. It doesn't even matter. So there's a lot of more issues there that I didn't want to bring out just for the sake of time. But it's not like he was practicing not only not practicing safe sex, but he's not even practicing trying to what you call make sure she don't get pregnant in the sex act, unlike his son Onan did when he dealt with her. His thing was that he didn't mind having sex with this woman Tamar, but he mind about her getting pregnant, and the offspring would belong to his brother So that's what he mind. So then he practicing calling himself practicing birth control in that sense, and we would call it such a thing. So where Yehudah himself, that wasn't even the issue. She get pregnant, I'm just having a good time. So it's a lot of areas that I didn't, I avoided it because of a particular reason, because you could expand on every particular portion in scripture. But my main point here is bringing this up is just to say that she wasn't a low class individual, because the Messiah and the kingship coming through that area as well. And even to show some kind of virtue within her, she winds up not even saying who the stuff belonged to. She said, whoever this belonged to, that's who I'm pregnant by. And she sent it. She didn't cry out her name, looking for truth and honesty to be displayed. So much there. So I just wanted to just bring that point out, and you can further discuss it with your various teachers, because there's a lot more that I'm not bringing out now for the sake of time, because that's not so much my agenda. I just wanted to address that particular point. And I'd like to go into Miquetz, the 41st chapter, before I go into the Haftarahs and tying Hanukkah. So hopefully I can bring out some points. Now, this is it says that it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. All right. Now we know about the dream and everything like this. 2 years since the butler had been restored. 2 years extra, Joseph is still in the prison. We know also, and literally, there's always a discussion. Did he have the dream 2 years later? Or literally, as it's written, it was a 2 years old dream that started bothering him later. All right, so, and that's from a grammatic structure when we look at it in the Hebrew, but that's not a major point right now, but a point of discussion for those that do delve into the language. But I'd like to bring out this point here, is that throughout the book of Genesis, you got a total of 11 dreams. 11 dreams in the book of Genesis. And the first time you read about anybody having a dream is not an Israelite, not one of the patriarchs, but you read about Abimelech. So you read about Abimelech's dream. Then you read about Yaakov's 2 dreams. One when he was getting ready to leave, and one while he was over there in Aram. All right. Then you read about let me see if I'm correct. Yeah. Then you read about Joseph, Laban's dream. So you read about Laban's dream. So you got Abimelech's dream, Yaakov 2 dreams, Laban's dreams. Then you got 3 dreams from Joseph. All right. So you got, the first dream, we don't know what that was, but we know he had a dream and he told it to his brothers. The other two dreams, we read about that. Then you read about the baker and the butler's dream. All right, so now we got up there to 9. And then we got the 2 dreams that Pharaoh had. So it's 11 dreams mentioned in the book of Genesis. And that more than any other book in the whole scriptures. So now we what we have in common is that Pharaoh had these dreams and we had them in one night. And we know from the story how the dreams were about he having 7 cows, and he stood up on the Nile, you know, and he looked for the interpreter for the dreams. As he had the 7 cows come out, they're looking beautiful, and then 7 cows coming out the river, then it looks so well. Now we always think about the regular cows, and I, you know, myself and people from my background, we tend to always say the hippopotamuses, because regular cows, especially in the Nile, where their crocs at, ain't gonna be coming out. And we know that particular world is part of Africa. So we know regular cows that we think about today, it's not going up in the rivers and hanging out up in there. So hippopotamus, they are called, you know, their offspring is called calves. And sometimes the females are called cows. And the males are tend to call bulls. So we got to think of that, just like we think about corn as opposed to wheat. You know, mostly wheat in that part of the area, not so much corn or the maize like we refer to today. So we got to constantly envision location and culture of the time when we look at these stories. All right, but when Pharaoh had the first dream, and the poor-looking cows ate up the good-looking cows, he was troubled. But not as troubled as when the 7 stalks of wheat that looked good was eaten up by the wheat that was blasted with the east wind. So that's what really shook him up. One, wheat don't have mouth. So how does wheat eat another thing? And then what puzzled is that, how is it that it seems the number 7 would be significant. So he said 7, whatever, 7 days, 7 years, whatever, 7 months, whatever, you know, that'd be something to kind of figure out. But one thing everybody could agree on, that you got 7 good and 7 bad. But the interpretation we know, looking from the story, and knowing the story, what we find to be strange is that, how is it when we find out the answer, 7 good years and 7 bad years, how come we didn't see that? You know, how come we didn't recognize that? How come none of the other wise men that deal with dreams? And also, while I'm speaking about wise men, it's the first time you read about the word chokmah being used for wise men in the scriptures too as well. That's what I like about Genesis. You find a lot of first that's recorded in the book of Genesis. But so those that dealt with you know, all his magicians and his wise men, he called them, they couldn't interpret it. But one of the things is that when he told the dream to Joseph, but before we even get to that, the butler said he remembered his fault, you know, and when he remembered his fault, that then he, you know, he started explaining what happened way back then, a couple of years ago, when he was put in the dungeon. And that's when he got Joseph to come up. Dreams got Joseph in trouble, and dreams started to come and bring him out of trouble. And the interpretation of the dreams. But what I like to point out is that when the Pharaoh told Joseph his dream, he told it different. In the beginning, Pharaoh in his own dream considered himself standing up on the Nile, like over the river, on the river, not on the banks. So that you make you wonder, why did he change his wording? Where one, he looked like a god standing on the water, and the other said he looked like a normal man to the side. So these are things that when we go into the dream, we could discuss a lot more in there. But what I like within the dream, you know, the interpretation is that Joseph said the interpretation is in the dream. Say, how is that Pharaoh knew that Joseph gave the right interpretation? Because Joseph said the Creator had already showed them and is in the dream. Everybody think of, okay, the answer to the problem is in the dream. You know, so that's how Joseph was able to give him advice. See, a lot of people could say, well, you got 7 things going to be wrong and 7 things going to be right. But what is the solution? So a lot of us like to be a sage on the stage instead of a guide to the side. So Joseph is not trying to be a sage on the stage. He's trying to be a guide from the side, in the sense that both of those people at the time, both of those people, both of dreams, and both dreams, that the good and the bad is side by side. The good and the bad of the cows, the good and the bad of the wheat. So they're saying the answer is, in good times, you recognize if you don't prepare, bad times will come behind that. You know, and that is what it's looking at, that you got to prepare in good times. And it gives substance that they thrive off of. The Egypt is the gift for the now, life-sustaining force. But in any event, Joseph was told just to interpret the dream, but not only interpret the dream, he gave it a solution. So now when we're going to move on past the dream that Joseph had, and we're going to think about when the brethren get before Joseph. All right. But Pharaoh himself also became a matchmaker for Joseph, giving him a wife after he promoted him. And not only giving him a wife by promoting him, he had 2 sons, and Asher and Ephraim. So he raised up, and you ask a lot of questions that Joseph in Egypt all this time, for basically stayed 22 years before he seen his father. But some questions you might want to discuss and ask amongst yourselves when you discuss that story is, why is it that if you living through the land of plenty for 7 years, you the second most powerful guy in Egypt, why you never try to contact your father? Just something to discuss. There's always a bunch of comments on it, but it's some things to look in deeper to it, because you're the second most powerful man in the world. All right, so you mean tell me you couldn't send a message, and you're dealing worldwide and supplying the world, and you went into 2 years of the famine before your brethren come down. And then it said Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him. Those are other things you got to ask. How is it that he recognized them and they couldn't recognize him? And from what vantage point? Symbolism or physical? So those are things that should be looked into a little bit more when Joseph's brothers come down. And then just to fast forward, because I'm not going to focus much in there, so much in this particular area, is that when they come down, he charged them as spies, and not only he charged his brothers as spies because he remembered the dream. He only remembered the dream after they show up, and sometimes he try to put, people try to put their dreams into effect because it seems close, but I'm trying to make it work out. But in any event, not only, and also you find also that he spoke through an interpreter. This is the first time you hear the thing of an interpreter in scriptures. But we know that when he came back, when the brothers come in after he charged them as being spies, and they say they all one man's children, and they talk about how many they have, brothers they have, and one is not, and the other one's at home. All right. When he charged them as spies, Joseph told them, look, one of y'all gonna have to stay behind. So another question we could discuss later on amongst various congregations and amongst because the story is never just that simple in Genesis. Another question I'd like to put out there is, how is it that these guys here come on down, and then Joseph charged him with spying and lock up his brother? He heard him arguing. So Reuben wasn't the one, wasn't the worst one of the bunch. So he locked up Shimon. And he selected Shimon and kept him incarcerated and sent him back. Now, another thing to consider as we go through the story is that when they tell their father, Simeon's locked up. They tell their father, we can't go back down there to get any food unless Benjamin's with us. Reuben comes up with a strong idea that's really, really crazy. If I, send the boy with me. If I don't bring him back, then, you can slay my 2 sons if I don't bring him back. He didn't ask the sons how they feel about it. Abba, you mean tell me if you fail in your mission, I'm the one got to throw my head on the chopping block? Those are some of the things to discuss, which we know is pretty bizarre, but I'm just saying, why would a man say that? And then, why would Yehudah, who lost 2 children already, he know the feeling of losing 2 children, make a surety for Benjamin. And we look, a lot of times, even when I teach sometimes on this particular portion, I just focus on certain areas because of time constraint. But there's a lot of variables that could be brought out. One of the variables I like to bring out is that, how is it that you're going to be sure that Benjamin is going to come back when Simeon and Levi destroy a whole city by themselves, and you couldn't even bring Simeon out the palace? So this is something to discuss. You couldn't bring one brother out of a building where you was all together, and yet 2 of these guys, Shimon and Levi, wiped out a city. And now you're going to say you come back and leave him there. So you gave up on Simeon to come back with the food to your father and them and sit down for a period of time. And then you're going to say, I guarantee I could bring Benjamin back when you couldn't bring Simeon back. And all those, these like the tough fighters. So these are some things that we should, look into, discuss, stimulate discussion. I'm just bringing out different various points there. It stimulates discussion. And then when Jacob reluctantly sent them back, you notice he sent certain products there, date honey, or some people might think it's pure honey. It could be date from the date palm tree, and they had nuts. So you say, well, if they had that there in Canaan, why are they going down to Egypt for grain? Well, cattle don't do too well off of date nuts or honey or regular nuts. They need grain. So just like we need grain, they need some grain. So hence they need a certain amount of food to go there. And Jacob took several steps. First of all, he knew this worked with Esau. So not only, send back double the money because it's oversight, and then money enough to buy. And then, because it could have been an oversight, also send him some gifts, and he prayed, similar to what he did when he was getting ready to encounter Esau, and said, perhaps, he'll find favor. And then if I'm bereaved of my children, then I'll be bereaved of them. But one of the central things I like to just think about before I go into the Haftarah is that, why is it that the Creator let Yaakov know in a dream while he was in Laban's area what's going on with the cattle? And yet, 20-something years later, no time at all did the Creator let him know that Joseph was alive. Could it be possibly the state of being that Yaakov was in? That sometimes when you get so bogged down with emotional problems that you don't you become distant from the Creator instead of focusing and looking to the hill from which comes your help. These are the questions that you could bring out and discuss in the story here. So now I know I didn't explain much. I just brought out some things for you to discuss amongst your various teachers, because my aim and objective is just perhaps share other viewpoints, but not necessarily to change your point of view. So I just hopefully I was successful, God willing, in that area. So we're going to talk about the Haftarah that people tend, most people might have read amongst the community and I'm originally from, the Book of Kings, 1 Kings, the 3rd chapter. But I'm going to focus on the Zechariah, but I just want to read a couple of verses from the 1 Kings, 3rd chapter, and picking it up from the 15th verse of 1 Kings. You got that, Chief, or you're going to be, or you want me to get? I get it. No, I get it. You stay Zechariah, because we're going to be in Zechariah 2nd 14. All right. So 1 Kings 3rd chapter, starting from the 15th verse, it said, "And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants." Now, the reason this is chosen is because it was the same term that that Pharaoh did when he woke up and said, "Why your cots? Yeah, your cots." Is almost the cots is of the same word with Miquetz at the end, but it also means when he awoke, when he stimulated. So Solomon awoke from the dream, just like Pharaoh awoke from his dream. So that's one of the reasons why they used this particular episode here to tie it in with the Sidra, the regular Sidra. As I said before, sometimes the Haftarah may have one or two lines, a few line verses, and related to the Sidra, but it has its own unique message there. All right, and we know as we go further, it says Solomon had already asked for wisdom. Wise understand the heart to judge, such a wise and understand the people. And so now he have his first case to come before him, and these are two women who are called harlots. And we know that they dwelt together, and one woman supposed to overslept her child, and they died in the morning. And we know that she supposed to took her child, switched it with the dead child, the live child, and then they bring in a case up to Solomon about the dead child. We know that Solomon heard which one, claimed the child to be theirs, and the other one claimed the child to be hers. So Solomon asked for a sword and dealt with a mother's emotion. But it's a lot of missing things here, because a lot of us watch court TV. So what you got to ask a bunch of questions like parenting, father, any other relatives. If you sleep, how you see what's going on when you sleep? How you know this happened that way? All these different things could come up in that particular Sidra. See, we know he dealt with the nature of the woman and by determining who is the actual mother of the child, without going into all the other nuances that how can you know she switched it? If you were asleep, how you know she slid it? How you know she overslept her baby? How you know her baby just didn't die naturally without her oversleeping it? So all these things here was immaterial, and which is a lesson to be learned, because sometimes things don't always appear like as it seems, to the open eye. So it calls for investigation, and then they go beyond sight and into a deeper area to determine who was the mother. So all those things come up before him in the case. He dealt with the case at hand, which is a lesson for us to judge certain situations. We judge the situation, the actual situation that's before us sometime, as opposed to going through the other things about this and that and the other that may be materialistic related or not related. But the main thing at hand is the situation that you're supposed to judge. His thing was to judge who is the actual mother of the child, as opposed to whether she's a good mother, whether she got this story right or not. The moral issues was not even a question. And because of that determination, everybody was he got fame behind that. And it seemed like a simple case. They didn't have Maury and everybody else like that, DNA. So it seemed like a simple case, but it's not as simple, because when everything we look in the scriptures, we can always bring out other little details in it. So now that would be the normal thing that he have, and also that this the Sidra that most people would be reading if they don't follow maybe another approach. And other people might have read from the book of Zechariah, which is dealing with the season Hanukkah. And the reason I'm going here in the book of Zechariah, because we're still into the season. Now, most of y'all might, when y'all mostly see this talk I'm giving, is already Hanukkah be over with. But right now we're into the 7th day of Hanukkah. Let me just matter of fact, I think I'll save it for the end. So we're gonna pick it up from the 2nd chapter of Zechariah and 14th verse.
We are in
Zechariah.
Zechariah. You said chapter 2?
Yeah, chapter 2, 14th verse.
Verse 14. It reads on this wise. Verse 14. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion. For lo, I come and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith Yehovah. And many nations shall join themselves to Yehovah in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that Yehovah of hosts has sent me unto thee. And Yehovah shall inherit Yehudah as his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Be silent all flesh before Yehovah, for he is aroused out of his holy habitation.
All right, hold it right there. Now, before we go further, all right. Now, I'd like to bring out this point here. This after they came back after the Babylonian captivity. They started working. They had permission to build the temple, the 2nd temple. And due to problems in the land, it was cut short. So now, after a little bit of time, as we go, we find out, I think in Ezra 5, that they got permission to resume under Darius. They got permission to resume building. So sometimes they started an enterprise, and then it was cut short, and now they got permission to do it again. So we're gonna find also one of the things about the Hanukkah thing, and we were talking about Hanukkah, as being dedication, but the main one dedication they talk about is basically the altar. All right, we always say we try to apply it to we dedicating ourselves to the service of the Creator. But what they actually was doing is dedicating the altar, and not to change a little bit, but before that, the Hasmoneans, their altar was desecrated a couple years after Jerusalem altar had already been desecrated. But the one they was replacing was at Jerusalem when they got back, and so that was a dedication to the altar. and hence that those that follow a certain tradition, they read every day in the morning prayers. Those that follow a particular rabbinic tradition will read the book of Numbers, the 7th chapter, where all the princes of the tribe was making a dedication to the service of the Most High on their particular day. All right. And when Hanukkah has a Shabbat in between, during the Shabbat of Hanukkah, the regular Haftarah that they would read, which would be normally be Book of Kings, they changed it to the Haftarah that has something to do with that particular season, which would be Zechariah, which we are reading now. And I just want to know, sometimes, and depends on how Hanukkah falls, you might have 2 Shabbats that come in, since it's an 8-day period. During the Hanukkah, you have a different Haftarah read the following Shabbat, which you normally wouldn't read the other one. But Miquetz tend to always be along the Hanukkah week, in the Hanukkah season. So, and so here it is, it's about starting over again. They started from Cyrus' time, they will stop. And then they began to start once again. And one thing I like to bring out that Chief Foos brought out great about the Hanukkah history. Those that haven't listened to his talk on D.C.B. should listen to it, thoroughly. But this is the first time in the history of any people, as far as Israelites go, or any people I know of, that the war was fought not for land and not for wealth, but just to be able to say, I want to live my life according to God's standards. That's deep. It wasn't about the land. It wasn't about the taxes. It wasn't about anything else except allow me to have freedom of religion. But that sounded like America. So people came over here for that. But basically, that's what it was. The freedom of to be able to worship the way I want to worship in my time, in my place. So that's important to notice. But we go to the 3rd chapter of the same book, Zechariah.
We're in chapter 3, verse 1. It reads, "And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of Yehovah, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him."
Hey, hold on right there. Satan just means accuser, but I don't want people to get too spooky, right? Because people get up there, say the devil maybe did it, all this kind of stuff. Right. You know what I mean? But it's here to raise a particular point. All right. It said Joshua the priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. So now, keep going. We're going to read just a little bit further.
Verse 2. And Yehovah said unto Satan, Yehovah rebuked thee, O Satan, yea, Yehovah that have chosen Jerusalem rebuked thee. Is not this man a brand plucked out of the fire?
Hold on right there. In other words, I know he messy. I know he ain't all he need to be right now. But I saved him for a reason. I'm working with him. So this inspiration saying, look, why is it that we had those problems in the first place? Because too many of us was lack in our observance. That's why we had so much problems with the Hellenism. See, most times people bring religion to the forefront.
Right.
But now they're bringing a philosophy to the forefront. So it said, do you want to really be a citizen?
Right.
And so people figure, hey, citizenship, we ain't talking about praying to this pantheon per se. We just saying, look, we don't need to deal with God like we used to. In Greek philosophy, the gods need them. And Pharaoh's dream is always manipulating the God. And our way of life is about we falling in line with our God's demand. That's a difference.
Right.
Where other doctrines, they consider themselves smarter than the God, so they try to bribe the God, manipulate their gods, and then Hellenism is like, God, we don't need God. God need us. You know what I mean? We can work this out ourselves. But as Israelites, we got to realize what role we play. And we are the ones that's made by the Creator for his glory. And we therefore must serve him. You know, and therefore we don't control God. We actually, God, we actually work and submit ourselves to the service of the Creator. So the Creator saying, yeah, people are going to talk about you, look at you. But you notice the first thing they try to clear up? Said, with them, first off, before the Maccabees could talk about lighting anything, they first got to clean up the priesthood. That's the first thing they got to read. So now, then the second Commonwealth, yeah, well, we stopped building for a minute. All right, we could start building. So before we start building, we got to have somebody there capable enough and clean enough to be able to work on this thing, to do certain things. So now, since we need people clean enough, holy enough, it's almost like Yom Kippur. The priest got to deal with himself, his household first. You know, so therefore, the Creator is saying, look, I'm working with the priesthood first. I'm cleaning him up so he can do his job. I know he ain't that correct yet, but the Creator can make things and fix it. So let's pick it up from there. Third verse.
Verse 3 reads, Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. And he answered and spoke unto those that stood before him, saying, Take the filthy garments from off him. And unto him he said, Behold, I cause thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with robes. And I said, Let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head, and clothed him with garments, and the angel of Yahweh stood by. And the angel of Yahweh forewarned Joshua, saying, Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, Thou wilt walk in my ways, and if thou wilt keep my charge, and will also judge my house, and will also keep my courts, then I will give thee free access among these that stand by. Hear now, O Joshua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men that are assigned. For behold, I will bring forth my servant, the shoot. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone are 7 facets. Before I will engrave the graving thereof, saith Yahweh of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity off that land in one day. In that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. Okay, now, this, first of all, is showing that you got to get the priesthood together, showing that the Creator is getting it together. But I'm not going to go into the dialogues, the person, he and, who's saying what at this time. That's not what I want to focus on at this particular time. Who's doing the talking, and who, and when God the Creator is being talking, if it's the angels talking. But one of the things is that he had to get redressed. He had to be cleaned up before he could function. And also, the Creator said, if you do such and such thing, you got to be willing to serve, the Creator in the way he wants you to serve him, not the way you feel you should serve him. So what's important here, and I advise other people to go back over this here, because this is dealing with the season and also about the protocol about what goes first. You don't put the horse before the cart. So it's like step, station, degrees is how you prepare for the service. Who's supposed to prepare? Those that are going to lead the service got to be prepared first. They got to get right first, in order to be able to do their jobs. So we're going to pick it up from the fourth chapter, because we only got 7 verses in the 4th chapter to deal with. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 1. It reads, And the angel that spoke with me returned and waked me, as a man that is wakened out of his sleep. And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I said, I have seen and behold a candlestick all of gold, with a bowl upon the top of it, and its 7 lamps thereon. There are 7 pipes, yea, 7 to the lamps, which are upon the top thereof, and 2 olive trees by it, and one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. And I answered and spoke to the angel that spoke with me, saying, What are these, my Lord? Then the angel that spoke with me answered and said unto me, Knowest thou not what these are? And I said, No, my Lord. Then he answered and spoke unto me, saying, This is the word of Yahuwah unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of Yahuwah of hosts. Hallelujah.
Okay.
Oh, hold on, one
Now,
more. You want me to do the last verse?
well, no, we picked, well, might as well finish it out. Yeah, finish out. Then
Verse 7. Who art thou, O great mountain, before Zerubbabel? Thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the top stone with shoutings of grace, grace unto it. Hallelujah.
All right. Now, by my spirit, now I'm going to go back and tack on Pharaoh's dream and Joshua's sleep in his vision, and then bring up some interesting points. You notice in Pharaoh's dream, you had and tied into the season. It was 7 good-looking hippos or cows, as you say, and 7 ill-favored looking cows. And then same thing, good-looking wheat and ill-favored wheat. But you notice that the scrawny, the weak, overpowered the strong. That's almost like the Maccabees itself. It was the hands of the few, the hands of the weak, that overpowered the mighty. All right. This would shock not only Pharaoh then, but what would it mean? That you got somebody that's weaker, more mightier than the one that looks healthy and stronger. That shouldn't be. Any people will worry about that, especially if the interpretation is about my demise now. So it is that we read here in this particular portion that, when it's talking about my spirit, a lot of people figure it's the strength. This one thing that we relate to the Maccabean period as well. And also, you notice that the problem is that the Creator talk about the 2 olive branches. All right, we talk about the miracle of the oil, and whether we go deal with the being lasting for 8 days or lasting 1 day, we know one thing for sure. It was one oil left with the priest's seal on it. Now, what's unique about that in the Maccabean story, in history, is that seal don't mean that it wasn't open. Seal means that it's stamped, and you got the actual seal like you got for like Judah's signet, or like a king. They say this is for lack of term, this is kosher. All right, this is authentic. This wasn't open, and you notice that it's an unnamed person that put that seal on there, because we don't know what priest actually hit it and left that one there untouched with the seal and saying this is pure and can be used for the menorah. And this part of and you notice they talk about the menorah, the candle itself, the menorah. And during this particular time, you find that all through the neighborhoods, those might observe it. You might find that they have a menorah up, and they light each candle, one a day, plus the middle one they call it shamash, which is the guardian candle. And they might have 9 instead of 8, 9 instead of 7, and that's because they didn't want anything similar to that of that was actually in the temple itself. But in passing with that, I like to bring out that it was never a concept of priest king that existed in the book of the Tanakh. The Creator make it very clear. I'm gonna clean up the priests, get them in order, but you're gonna have to have not only the spiritual side, a spiritual leader, but you're going to have a civic leader. And that's what it says. So, and that's what was lacking in the Maccabean period, because you had the spiritual side leadership taking a dual role. And it was never a dual role. While I'm speaking on this dual role, I like to just bring out this point here before I forget it, is that in lighting the Hanukkah candles, those that light them and those that have them in the house, they normally be in the window, and it's not a light that you're supposed to use to actually use by the see by, but a light that give off light outwardly, like the menorah inside the temple of the Mishkan. You know what I mean? It's not a light when the guy go into the Holy of Holies, into this holy spot, that he don't use that as a light to go up in there. It's to illuminate things outside. So we're supposed to illuminate ourselves outwardly. Now, it's certain traditions, and I just want to share this for those that actually follow those particular things. And it might be, and it's good knowledge to be able to know whether you participate or not in that area, is that the Hanukkah candle, you notice they're always in the window, but at one time they used to light the Hanukkah candle outside and the door, outside their houses. And when that changed, because we know the Maccabean rebellion is like 168 BCE. So the temple was destroyed 70 CE. So you figure they had a certain tradition going on before the destruction of the temple and everything like that. So you could just do the research on the history. But what happened during around close to around 4 something CE, that they used to have a ruling, rabbinic ruling, just for those that, a bit of trivia for those that might want to search these things out, is that they used to have the candles, the menorahs always outside the house. So they might have a marking on the doorpost on one side and the menorah on the other side, outside the house. So according to rabbinic ruling, for those that study that they had to have it on the outside, but then why is it on the inside? But that was a ruling that they relaxed and changed later. Because during the Parthians, that was in Persia, and they had a religion called Zoroastrianism, that they had a dualism of God, a daytime and a night God, dark and a light God. And during certain periods of time, they weren't allowed to have any kind of light outside the house. And so you can have it inside the house, but not outside. So that's when they start putting it in the window, but inside the house. This just something, maybe just a little trivial to learn, and maybe if you're interested in that. And also, what is fascinating, that they have some rules in reference to the Hanukkah season, is that if you had just enough money to buy wine and enough money to buy the candles for the Hanukkah menorah, what should you buy? If you had wine, buy wine for Shabbat, or you're gonna buy candles for Hanukkah, then which one you should buy? So most people would normally say, and buy the wine for the Shabbat. But for those that may know, you would think that, but most of them would be buying the candles for Hanukkah. That's the ruling. You buy that first if you only had just enough money for one. But when it comes down to candles for Shabbat, those that light candles before the Shabbat come in, and those that are buying candles for the Hanukkah menorah, and you only had enough money for one, which one you buy? Then you buy the candles for Shabbat, which is supposed to illuminate the inside of the house. So you're supposed to be that. Where at Hanukkah, the candle is supposed to illuminate to the world who you are. This is supposed to illuminate and keep the peace within the house, saying this is what you really are. This is the essence of you. So it just a little bit of things, for people to know the differences of value and the symbolism behind the values that's embedded within it. But as I go leave this here particular portion, I like for people to know that the season of this victory that we have, the dedication. You know, we're not only dedicated to altar, but we're supposed to dedicate ourselves. And we know that it starts with the priest getting clean first in the book of Zechariah. Then it's talking about the people, you know, the land, and then, you know, and the people. So all three things is about got to go through a cleansing period in order to be in the service of the Most High. So the priest, the place, and the people in order to worship. So as we go and come to an end of this particular season, that we got to say how well and how long we can stay dedicated to this cause. So hope you got something out of what I said. Any mistakes have been my own.
Hallelujah. I don't have much questions today. In fact, I don't have any questions today.
Okay.
The only thing is in this portion where it speaks about you know how sometimes in Christianity you have the whole devil and Satan was a fallen angel, but here when it speaks it says the angel and Satan, right? Now, like you explain, or like we understand, that this is just a vision that I suppose Zechariah is having, and in the vision Joshua, right? That he's having, and he's having a vision of and he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of Yehovah, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. So is it Joshua that's having the vision, or is it Zechariah that's having the vision?
Well, Zechariah had the vision, but it's about concerning Joshua.
It's concerning Joshua. So that's what I meant with Zechariah having the vision. So in Christianity, they said Satan is a fallen angel, but here he's not addressed as here. What is being given as Satan is not addressed that as an angel, but just as we understand the word Satan, just to mean adversary. Can you give a little bit more explanation on that?
Well, hopefully I can. And keep it pretty brief.
Right.
But one of the areas is that one, it describes that the priest Joshua is not all he needs to be at this particular time.
Right.
And knowing that, you know, sometimes people step to a job knowing that they ain't prepared for the job.
Right.
Knowing they ain't qualified for the job. Qualified, that don't only mean knowledge wise. It means physically wise. You know, in a physical sense. Right. So it is that when they talk about as a court case, you know, so in other words, it's almost like a court. And we always when we stand before the Creator, it's like standing before His presence, like standing before the judge of the whole world, you know, in the universe. And so here it is that one angel preparing him, and then you got the accuser saying he's not qualified. Why would the accuser say he's not qualified? The priest himself must know he's not qualified. If he got filthy clothes on, it's something you should be able to see that the clothes are filthy. But why it became filthy is not explained. So, you know, though he got filthy clothes on, you say, okay, how did it become filthy in the first place? That's a question. Could it be a blemish in his children? Which most people, commentators would say, that the filth that he's talking about is that he's not raising up his household properly. You know, you have a lot of issues within the household. Just like Jacob had a lot of issues in his household that still exists in this particular point in time. So the Creator said, look, I plucked him out of a fiber. In other words, he should have been destroyed. But I plucked him out. I saved him. He normally wouldn't have made it. And I'm dressing him up now. I'm giving him another start. So with the Creator, and the theme behind that is that we had already started working on the temple, and we would stop and went through a pause. But we read in Ezra that Ezra was waiting for a priest that had the Urim and Thummim. I mean, those that read the book of Ezra, when he was trying to get things together. And say, well, Why would he have an Urim and Thummim, the lights of perfection, and captivity? What are you doing with it over there? So there's a lot of missing pieces in our history when we read the prophecy. So when we talk about Satan himself as an accuser, it's just like we would say, wouldn't qualify him to be the priest. Why is it after he's been over there all that time? We know what a priest is supposed to do. Who purified? Who said he qualified? And the thing is that the priest supposed to stay in his lane. So Satan, the adversary, the creator, letting you know that when you try to do right, you're gonna have it says the righteous is abhorred by the wicked. And he said, well, why is the righteous abhorred by the wicked when you're not oppressing the wicked? If you're a righteous individual, I'm not trying to take advantage of you. If I'm a righteous individual, I'm trying to focus on making sure I don't harm anybody. And I do what the creator want me to do. But why is you hating me? And I'm not trying to hurt you. So that is one of the things that brought out in this thing about the adversary, which is the accuser, because it didn't say the accuser was justified. The accuser seen only what he thought. Joseph accused his brothers of being spies, but were they spies? Joseph was accused of being a rapist, but was he a rapist? Right. So that's why all this story ties into what was going on, that things is not always as is seen, on the surface. So hopefully, to answer the question, I'll tell when everybody chat, right. But I left a lot of things out there for people to discuss amongst their various teachers without, embedding certain viewpoints out.
Hallelujah. Torah about Nasik. Thank you once again for your input and for your knowledge that the Most High God has blessed you with. And hey, shalom, 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 family. Everyone out there. Shalom to everyone out there on the Uzi channel on YouTube, and also on my Facebook page. If you're listening to us at this moment, if you join us tonight is the I guess you could say it's the eve of Hanukkah, right? And we is the first night of Hanukkah, and we are going to go into a little bit of the history. And I have the pleasure to introduce my brother, who always joins me whenever I need him, my brother Chief Avdiel Ben Levi, who's been doing a lot of big things lately. I'm so proud of him right now, of some of the things he's doing right now, representing the nation, representing Israel in a positive way, making big connections and all those sorts of big things. So he's joining me tonight to talk a little bit about Hanukkah and the tradition of Hanukkah and what it means to us. How are you, Chief? Shalom, shalom, Chief. Can you hear me?
Slika. I'm doing
Okay.
good, Chief. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
I want to say,
How are you?
I'm doing good. I want to say first and foremost, giving all honor, all praise to the Holy One of Israel, God of our
Hallelujah.
ancient forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the true and the living God, even the Most High God. In the spirit of our teacher, Chief of Chiefs, I also want to say he is the creator, maker, owner, and possessor of all that there is.
Amen.
And to him do we owe all honor and glory. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So before we get started, I want the people online, whether you be on Facebook or whether you be on the Uzi Alewi channel, I want you all to begin to share the link. This is going to be a very interesting night, very interesting topic. We're going to be going through some history of that time and what was happening during the time of the Maccabees and what the significance of Hanukkah is from an Israelite point of view, right? And my brother Chief Avdiel, who is a historian, who is a Hebrew teacher, Hebrew scholar, will be helping us to parse through some of this stuff, some of these scriptures, some of this history, which is very important to us. And a lot of this history sometimes is left out, and people don't read through it or don't acknowledge it. But I think that it's very important for us to acknowledge this history and to let everybody know what this history is all about. So I want everyone to please share, hit that share button, send it out to everyone, let them know that we are out here and we are talking about Hanukkah tonight, the first night of Hanukkah, or the observance of Hanukkah, and what it's all about. So, Chief, first I want to start out by asking you, right? The first thing I want to ask you is the Apocrypha, right? Where the story of Hanukkah is written. Was the Apocrypha ever, I know that it was in Greek before, right? Was there ever an original version of the Apocrypha in Hebrew?
Oh,
Do you know, would you know that history?
Oh, absolutely. And I want to be very, very accurate. So I want to make a mild discrepancy, or I want to make a mild correction. The original language of the Apocrypha, the earliest manuscripts that we have, the Apocrypha, is actually in Aramaic. Most people know of the Greek copies. Most people are obviously more familiar with it by its Greek name, but we do actually have very, very old manuscripts of the Apocrypha, and it's written entirely in Aramaic. In fact, a large part of that which was recorded in Aramaic has been reduplicated on the Safaria app. So if you have the Safaria app, or if you go to Safaria, I believe it's .org online, you can click and you can look for the Apocrypha, and you'll find all of the books of the Apocrypha in the original Aramaic right there.
Okay, so on the Safaria app, Aramaic. So Aramaic is actually a language that we began to speak when we came out of Babylon. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Immediately following the Babylonian captivity, we come into the Persian captivity, where Ezra the scribe introduces us to the Aramaic square script. It's at this point in history that we transition from speaking the old Hebrew into what we refer to today as Aramaic.
Okay, so then my question to you is why maybe some Israelites don't accept the Apocrypha? Do you know some of the reasons why? And has the Apocrypha been tampered with, or it might be some things in it that might not be, as we would say, kosher, being that it, I guess it went through Christian hands and they published it, and some of their books, mainly when you see is mainly like in the King James version of an Apocrypha. What is your whole take on that?
That's an excellent question. So when we talk about the Apocrypha in its original form and the reason why it was ultimately rejected from the biblical canon, there contains a great deal of discrepancy or unreliability of some of the redactors of the text. Because of some of the authors of the text, those who brought it to final edit are in question. And then some of the contents of various books of the Apocrypha, some of it is also in question. For those reasons, it definitely did not make the biblical canon. On top of that, the criteria for making the biblical canon, first and foremost, is that its contents stem from an era where there was still divine inspiration among the prophets of the Almighty. So if you notice, every canonical book of the Old Testament is from a period where there was divine inspiration, where there was someone actually communing with the Creator on some level. Even down to Ezra's age, our oral tradition speaks of something called the Bat Kol, which is the still small voice, which is a slight remnant of the spirit of prophecy still existing. But right after the Persian captivity, and when the Greek captivity begins, prophecy as we know it ceases to exist. And this is in accordance with the book of Daniel chapter 9, where it speaks about the prophecy of 70 weeks. And after 62 weeks, even prophecy and vision shall come to an end, which by that time period, we know we're talking about the Greco-Roman captivity. But first and foremost, we're talking about the Greeks.
Okay,
And
so
go ahead.
no, go ahead. You could
So
finish out your thought.
the Catholic Church decided that they would pick up what we put down. And again, the only reason why these books did not make the biblical canon is because they're not coming from an era where we still had divine inspiration. That's number one. Then number two, some of the contents of some of the books of the Apocrypha are unreliable in the sense that we have no contemporary source to confirm nor deny the author's words. And by the way, we do have something that we call literary criticism that takes place when it comes to the composition or the compilation of the biblical text that our ancestors employed. So because we have no fact checker to fact check these documents to make sure that they are what they're supposed to be, then we have to say for a number of reasons these books were rejected. And because they were rejected, the Roman Catholic Church picks them up, and then they begin to insert their Judeo-Christian ideas of the Bible into it. And then that revolutionizes the look of what is known today as the Apocrypha. It originally stemmed from the Greek term apocrypha, which means hidden. One of the reasons why it takes on that name hidden is that for many years, those who wrote it, they deemed it necessary to hide it from the adversary because they felt that the contents contained large portions of our history that if the adversary were to get too near to it, they can understand too much about our contemporary history. And remember, one thing is always true, no matter what era you're in, knowledge is power. Therefore, beware of those you empower with knowledge. So with that being said, when we put it down, the Catholic Church picked it up. No different than when our ancestors put down the Torah, the European Jew picks it up.
Are there any references to any stories of the Apocrypha in the book of, let's for example, like the book of Josephus or in the Talmud or any one of those books? Do they mention any of the history or the stories that we find in the Apocrypha today?
So you definitely have parts of the oral tradition that mention some of the stories. Most of the stories that you're going to find are the historical stories in the book of Maccabees. So you're going to find mention to Mattathias and his children. Obviously, you're going to find mention to Judah. But many of the other stories you're not going to find. No, you don't really find them. The only books that you really do find reference to is First and Second Maccabees.
First and Second Maccabees. So for what we know, and not only through the Apocrypha or the oral tradition or Josephus, we could pretty much say that the book of Maccabees is a historical, it's a historical fact that this happened.
Oh, absolutely, bar none. You could literally line up the books of First and Second Maccabees to a T with the historical record and what it reflects historically. The books of First and Second Matthew, bar none, are historical documents.
Maccabees, you mean Maccabees?
Yes,
You
Maccabees.
said Matthews.
Maccabees.
So okay, so let's set the scene because this is a very important part of our history. I have something here. It says, set in the tumultuous years of 175 through 143 BCE, First Maccabees narrates the history of the revolt against the Seleucid rule in Judea led by Judas Maccabeus and his brothers. So let's speak about the Seleucid rule, or where that originates from, the Seleucid rule, and where that whole idea of these rulers come from, stemming from the time of Alexander the Great. Give us a little bit of that history.
Okay, now I certainly can do that off my mind, but I also have a PowerPoint. Do you
Okay.
want
Oh,
brief
let's do it.
analysis and then go into the PowerPoint, or
Oh, you go right into the PowerPoint.
you
Definitely.
already know? You already know. Definitely. So here we go. I'm going to open up my share screen as soon as you give me that sharing ability.
I got you. Give me 1 second here, all right?
Okay, take your time.
I have to go to the big computer and give you that accessibility. Should have made you a co-host from the very beginning. Chief, try it now. I think you should be good.
Okay, let me see. There we go. Yep. There we go. And when you can see my screen, just let me know.
I see it.
Okay, excellent. All right. All right, all right, all right. Okay. So I've entitled this particular PowerPoint "The True History of Hanukkah" by Morey Avdiel Ben Levi. There's a lot of things that people assume about the stories of Hanukkah, but piece by piece, as we begin to gather together or galvanize the pieces of the puzzle, you'll notice that there's quite a few aspects of Hanukkah and even the Maccabean period in history that a lot of us take on face value without enough credible or verifiable research. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a couple of moments as I share a couple of slides within the next 15 to 20 minutes. But I definitely want to say that there is possibly one huge aspect of the Hanukkah tradition that many of us took for granted. And in more ways than one, we're about to see that unless we are privy to certain things, then there are aspects of Hanukkah that we're speaking of that are actually not rooted in the text. And you'll see what that means when we get there. So let me open up my first slide. And as always, we begin by giving praise. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to say hallelujah. I'm going to thank
Hallelujah.
Chief Uziel for opening up your platform to me.
Hey, thank you for
Also,
coming on, man.
thank you.
You always, we look out for each other, I guess,
Absolutely. Iron sharpens iron for sure.
Hallelujah.
All right. So, this particular history of what we are calling Hanukkah, which tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, it can be found in one book and one book only. These are the books of First and Second Maccabees in the Apocrypha. Hence my screen, which says Sefer Maccabim 1 or Aleph, the book of the Maccabees, Aleph, the first book of the Maccabees. Here we go. Let's talk about some history that leads up to the actual event that we celebrate today. As Alexander the Great dies in 323 BCE, his empire is divided between his four generals. That is Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. By the way, this actually is mentioned in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, chapter 8, it talks about the horn that splits into four. That horn that arose was the horn of Yavan, the horn of Greece. And its king, its leader, is Alexander the Great. And as history records, and as we clearly now know and understand, upon the death of Alexander the Great, four of his military generals take control for his empire as it was in his day, the surviving remnants of his empire. They vie and fight among one another for all of the places and spaces that Alexander the Great conquered. Mind you, this is recorded in the Torah no less than at least 200 to 300 years before that event takes place. That's very important to mention. It's highly important to mention that Daniel, who prophesied during the era of Babylon, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar takes over the Babylonian Empire, sacks the city of Jerusalem, besieges it, and takes the city in 586 before the Common Era. Daniel's prophecy begins contemporary with that takeover. And Daniel, as a prophet, his ministry is between that time, 586 BC, all the way until just before we step into the beginnings of the 5th century BCE, which is the 400s. So he has a long reign. Remember, Daniel spoke for a long time, prophesied for a long time. But my point is, from the time that his prophecy begins, 586 BC, until the time of 331 BCE, Alexander the Great, you have at least 250 years that have passed. And 250 years before Alexander the Great dies and his empire is split among his top four generals, the biblical prophet Daniel prophesied something that would occur 250 years before it occurred. So while we're in this moment, let's feel very free to put great respect on the Torah and its annals of recordation in terms of recording history. Yes, the Torah is also a history book in the sense that the goal of the Torah is to be a moral guide, but it contains great histories that to this day cannot be contradicted. And in fact, the only thing modern science has been able to do with the histories of the Torah is slowly but surely begin to confirm them. Let's also note that. Of the four Hellenistic kingdoms or Hellenistic generals, two fought for control over Israel. That would be the Ptolemaic Empire, which is the Ptolemaic king of Egypt, and the Seleucid Empire in Syria. This is referred to in the book of Daniel as the king of the south and the king of the north. We're talking Daniel chapter 11. This entire series of events that begins with the takeover of Alexander the Great's kingdom by his four generals, that entire historical scenery plays out in the book of Daniel chapter 11. And midway, there's a focus on primarily what's called the king of the south, which is Egypt, and the king of the north, which is the Seleucid Empire of Syria. And again, the Ptolemaic Empire of Egypt being the king of the south. The separate kingdoms flourished in education, but there was internal rivalries that led to the fall of each to Rome eventually. Pompey made Syria a Roman province in 64 BC, and Cleopatra was the last Ptolemaic emperor in 51 to 30
In
BC.
Egypt, right?
But here's something that I definitely want to emphasize because I think it's necessary to point out.
Speak on it.
One of the underlying reasons that you're going to have war between the Ptolemaic kings of Egypt and the Seleucid kings of Syria is because Alexander's generals that assume kingship in Egypt, remember, when you come to throne on the soil of Kemet or Egypt, you're not just king, you're declared a god.
That's right. Pharaoh. That's right.
Pharaoh. In the language of the Medu Neter, the Nisut, which is the word for king, he becomes a Neter. He becomes a god, and he is worshipped. And in fact, Chief, as you and I have visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, when you go into the outdoor corridor where you see all of the colonnades and the great columns in the Colosseum that was built, the Roman style one, you'll notice that carved out on the cartouche or the chenu where the king's name is, you're seeing the name Pharaoh or Per-Ah. Per-Ah in the Medu Neter, and what we call Pharaoh in English, going back to eventually the word Pharaoh from the Greek. This began or was revitalized with the Greco-Roman kings that assumed kingship in Egypt. So the problem that the Seleucid Empire is now having, because mind you, part of the reason why there's going to be internal strife between these two super powerhouses is that every king of the Ptolemaic lineage is going to be declared a god simply because he's sitting on the Egyptian throne. On top of that, in the ancient day, Egypt was one of the major capitals of trade in the ancient world and trade and commerce. So what are they warring for? Control of trade and commerce, which is money, and control of spirituality. He who controls the two of those controls the world. And this is nothing new. Even as the Torah says, that which is that which shall be. That which has been done is that which shall be done, and there is nothing new under the sun.
That's right.
So these two kings perfectly understood that to control the masses, I had to have power of hand, might of hand. To the kings of the ancient world, that was translated no different than it translates today to the presidents and rulers of America and the West. They believe they have to have a stockpile of money. They also want to have a monopoly on quote unquote religion. So that is the essence of the internal strife that is occurring between those two. They're vying for the control of lands, money, and the then known world, and they're vying for control of people, which from time immemorial has come through what we call quote unquote religion. So that is the essence of the beginning of the war that takes place between these two mighty kings of Alexander's crumbling empire. Now, as you can see from my screen, as the empire is divided, I want everyone to notice that the Ptolemaic kings actually don't have that much land that they traverse and cover.
Right.
If you notice this, the Seleucid king,
he has a lot.
Vastness of his land.
Yeah.
He has a lot.
What's that? That's like all the way to India. He got from like the Euphrates to India.
He has from the border of the Black and Caspian Sea, which is the northwest tip of Mesopotamia, all the way to upper India, coming darn near to the borders of Asia or China.
China, right.
That's serious.
And he still wants more.
He still wants more. Whereas, well, there's a reason why he wants more.
Right.
And I'll get into that reason in a couple of seconds. Whereas the Ptolemaic king, he simply has control over Egypt and Israel. But don't let me fool you by the word simply, because remember, in the ancient world, there were many civilizations that rose and impacted the world that became great.
Like Egypt.
But even to this day,
Right.
no two nation states have achieved such a long-lasting name throughout the annals of history as the nations of Egypt and Israel. They're still lauded today in historical spaces all over the world. They're still the subject of the hottest debates and controversy in all of the halls of academia around the globe. So while Seleucus has a vast empire, as it were, he still does not have the nucleus of the world's power and authority and quote unquote religion. He does not have control over what is called the Holy Land and the land of Egypt.
Kemet.
And what everyone must know is that in the ancient world, before you have an airplane, before you have a car, and before you have a train, people are traveling around on horses, camels. Some people are traveling around on donkeys, even though it's known that you don't want to take a long trip with a donkey. They're not really built for that.
Right.
So, but the point is, how are people getting from point A to point B? They have to traverse through a particular body mass or land mass. Now, I want to also include that you obviously had people that were seafarers. You know, from the dawn of civilization, you can see that even the unification of ancient Kemet by Narmer, you can see a scenery where there's huge ships coming from Mesopotamia involved in the unification of the ancient Egyptian empire under its first king, Narmer. So you have people traveling by sea and you have people traveling by land. You have no one traveling by air. Why is that important? Well, if you want to go from Asia to Africa, what two nation states are absolutely important during that transition? The land of Canaan and the land of Egypt.
Right.
They are literally the gateway between Asia and Africa. That means that geographically, the position of the land of Canaan and Egypt historically has always been extremely sought after, simply because they first and foremost were a gateway to Asia or from Asia to Africa or from Africa, which is very, very important when we understand the historical record.
Absolutely.
Because these two continents achieved a lot of trade, not just in terms of commerce and resources, but also intellect.
It makes sense why most of the wars of the world were fought over Jerusalem naturally, because everyone, sought it because it was the Holy Land. And then Egypt because it's that gateway to a whole nother world.
Right. That's right.
Right.
So among all the four kings, and I want to definitely give this a little bit more time before I move on. Okay. So among Alexander's four generals, it is the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire that rise the greatest. You can even look at the landmass. The landmass tells you the extent of their might and power, because look at their two counterparts, their two rivals, Lysimachus and Cassander. Look how small the regions are that they govern. And then notice this. The Seleucid Empire, by show of the arrows, begins to usurp authority in those regions. That's what the arrows are showing you. The arrows are showing you that the Seleucid Empire is actually causing expansion into those regions, so that they're taking over those two regions that were ruled by the other two generals. So that the Seleucid Empire takes the territory of the other two generals, and that eventually becomes all of the Seleucid Empire. Very important. The only thing left now is Egypt. And at this time in history, Egypt still has a significant amount of control in the land of Canaan. Why is that? Because of Egypt's ties to Rome. And remember, Rome at this period is emerging as its own nation state. And Rome in our Tanakh is known as Kittim, which is where we see this right here. Again, going back to the book of Daniel, it speaks of ships of Kittim in the 11th chapter, because Rome is on the world scene at this point, and they're also literally on the scene in this rivalry, spectating and watching, just waiting, because we all know who takes the throne next. It's Rome. All right, let's move on. One of the things that the expansion of Alexander's general brought is what we call Hellenism, which is the spread of Greek culture and civilization throughout the then known world. The effect of Hellenism on the nation state known eventually as Judea, which is the land of Canaan in general, but eventually the historical record begins to refer to it as Judea, because that's the last remaining tribe, as we already know through history and even the Bible. The 10 tribes were kicked out of the land, were exiled much earlier by the Assyrian king. And you have remnants of the Levites and remnants of the Judites, so that the entire land is now referred to as Judea. And among the effects of Hellenism in the land of Canaan, one of the effects is that you notice that some among our people begin to embrace Greece in terms of their culture and their heritage. So they're becoming what is known as Hellenized. Hellenized. And this is mostly the upper class among our people.
Right.
Notice there's nothing new under the sun, because to this day, the upper class of our people in the diaspora are so immersed in Western culture to the extent that you want to ask them, do you remember that you're still Black?
Right.
Many of us know exactly what I'm talking about. That person that has achieved so much as a Black man in America, the Caribbean, and throughout our diaspora, that they begin to lose their identity as Black men. And for us who have finally come into the knowledge of who we are, we won't say they lost identity of being an Israelite, because most don't know they're Israelites. But what we still will say is that they lost their sense of identity of relating to the Africans of the diaspora.
Chief, cannot maybe this example would fit that today? Somebody like Candace Owens.
Woo! Oh man. Yes. Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Candace Owens would definitely fit that criteria to a T. She does more to defend white supremacy than she does to uphold the cultural dispositions of Black America.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. And that's an excellent point. So you have the Hellenization of the upper class among our people and the city dwellers. Then the lower class of our people are represented by a more pious character. These people are called the Hasidim. The Hasidim. Let me take time to point this out. Many of us are exclusively familiar with the term Hasidic or Hasidic because of the European Jew, but let me use this moment in time to remind you of something. Not only did they take your name, Judah, and call themselves Jewish, but even the term Hasidim originally referred to the pious among our people. Don't you know it's from this class that we get the Maccabean monarchy? The Maccabees come from what is referred to as the Hasidim or the Hasidim, the root being chesed in Hebrew, kindness or pious, the pious ones. And this is the lower class. There's always something significant about people who enjoy their lot. People who enjoy their lot are usually people that, the more that riches is multiplied, the more that people are never satisfied. The people you usually find content are poor people, to the extent that, if I could use America as an example, when white people roll by the hood, they say, what is this? Is that a Mercedes-Benz parked out the projects? Are they comfortable?
That's exactly
But our
what they
people
say.
have such a powerful and resilient spirit that we can find comfort in some of the places and spaces that would horrify others. Because for us, all we need to still have to maintain spiritual and or cultural identity is a strong sense of a connection to our God, our King, and our Maker.
Right.
We don't need all the riches. And this is not to say that we shouldn't pursue a better way of life financially. Absolutely not. But it is to emphasize the idea that our people are so beautiful in spirit that even being among the lower class, so long as we find our God, to us, to many of us, we're rich.
Spiritually
Go throughout
rich.
the hood. Absolutely. Go throughout the hood.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in Black America, no matter where you are throughout the Caribbean, no matter where you are in the UK, no matter where you are in Canada, no matter where you are in the African diaspora, notice that our people are content in the lowliest of spaces and places.
That's right. Favelas in Brazil. That's right.
So this is very important because it's the upper class among our people that are more susceptible to embracing Hellenism, whereas the lower class, which has a stronger connection to their God, is not. This is still the same. Go to Flatbush, Brooklyn right now. Drive down Flatbush. Count the churches. Count the churches directly around the corner on Flatbush Avenue.
Right.
Go throughout all of the downtrodden neighborhoods in Queens. Go through all the downtrodden neighborhoods in any of the major urban places in America, and you'll notice the same thing. Black people of lower class, so long as they have their God, they're content. Highly significant. When Judea comes under Seleucid rule, this is about the year 200 before the Common Era, or 200 BCE. These are Syrian Greeks. They're stationed in Syria, but they are Greeks. There's a person by the name of Jason among us. You read about him in the book of the Maccabees. He purchases or buys the position of high priest. If we were living during the era where the temple stood, our ancestors would have ripped their hair from their scalp at the very notion that the office of high priest is what? That was a huge slap in the face. And mind
Absolutely.
you, the Hellenistic Greek rulers made it possible. They said, yeah, that's okay. To the highest bidder goes the office of high priest.
Right.
Righteousness is no longer a criteria among the Levites to be considered. And remember, first and foremost, you have to be of the lineage of Aharon. And
Absolutely.
then within that lineage, you got to be the cream of the crop in terms of your righteousness, your morale. But in 200 BCE, when the Seleucids gained control, the office of high priest is now for hire. By the year 175 BCE, which is about roughly 25 years later, Antiochus IV, otherwise known as Antiochus Epiphanes, comes to power. This is a very interesting character throughout history. I'm not going to talk too much about him on this slide because he's on the next slide, but I just want to briefly say this is a very, very interesting character throughout history. A new priest comes to office, Menelaus, at this time also, and replaces Jason and begins to steal temple funds. So Jason ain't that great because he purchased the office of high priest, but it's not document that he's in there stealing from the temple. But Menelaus, the guy who replaces him, now comes into the temple and he's now stealing temple funds. So if you notice, it's degradation by degradation. Each generation is getting worse. Does it sound more familiar?
Yeah.
No different than our era.
That's right.
Listen to rap today, by the way. And you'll for those who are young, go and chart the history of hip hop from where it started and where it is now, and you'll understand by what we mean by degradation. Things just got worse. By the time we come to 168 BCE, and if you notice, the time period is jumping fast now where things get worse. There is a revolt that is led by Jason. This is the former high priest. But it is crushed by Antiochus. Greater Greek scrutiny and encroachment on the autonomy of the land. Extreme outlawing of Torah observance and practice also begins to occur. This is a historical item which was found in the land of Israel. This coin is supposed to be a replica of the very image of Antiochus Epiphanes. In fact, if you look very closely, where my arrow is behind Antiochus to the right of the coin here, you see his name spelled out in Greek, Antiochus.
Yes.
And here it says
Antiochus.
Epiphanes. And this is the earliest rendition that we have in history for how he looks. It's in the land of Israel.
Right.
It's not in Greece, which is, he's the Greek. It's not in Syria. It's not in Egypt. It's in Israel. So again, we know Antiochus is historical, for sure. Some people doubt whether or not the Bible is historical or the books of the Apocrypha. Well, while you're questioning those things, just remember, the person that no one disagrees is historical, Antiochus. The earliest record that we have of how he looks was found in the land of Israel. Keep that in mind. Antiochus IV Epiphanes is the little horn mentioned in the book of Daniel, chapter 8 and 11. In the year 200 before the Common Era, Israel was captured from the Ptolemies and came under the control of the Seleucids. Antiochus IV Epiphanes ruled the Seleucid Syria from 175 to 164 BC. So his rule was a little over 10 years. You want to say 11 years. He called himself Epiphanes, which means manifest. God manifest, by the way, because he claimed to be the manifestation of Zeus, the god of Greece at the time, the head of the Grecian pantheon. Now, remember what I said earlier. The beginning of the strife between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire is that the Ptolemaic Greek kings are kings in Egypt. Anyone that sits on the Egyptian throne is regarded as a god. So the Seleucid kings, while they control a vast amount of land, none of them are regarded as a god. Antiochus said, this stops with me. Because I am God. The buck stops here. I am Antiochus Epiphanes, which translates in the Greek language. I am the manifestation of Zeus.
Right.
So he was saying something that we also know to be well familiar in Christianity. He was God in the flesh.
Right.
And notice something. His enemies, or today we would say his haters, while he called himself Epiphanes, God manifest, his haters called him Epimanes, which translates in the Greek as madman.
Negro, you crazy.
Exactly. And I want to say, why would you think that they call him madman? But it's obvious.
Right.
He regarded himself as a god, and they knew he wasn't a god. So behind his back, they would call him madman. But I want to emphasize behind his back, because he literally was a madman. And there are historians and psychologists that take a look at history. The people looking into history are not just novices or not just great academians, but even a psychologist looks into history, because every now and then a historian may want or ask for a psychological assessment of a particular historical character from a real psychologist. And when psychologists analyze the history of Antiochus Epiphanes, they say he was quite literally clinically insane. By today's standard definition, he would be regarded as someone that was clinically insane. There's enough working evidence to actually say that.
even like over 2,000 years.
Check that out, right? Now, what I'm about to bring to your attention is very, very interesting. Let me go back. Sorry, let me go back one moment. Okay, so while Antiochus has his eyes on Egypt, he also has his eyes on the land of Israel. What Antiochus begins to do in his idea of usurping Egypt and finally taking over that as well, so as to bring all of Alexander's former empire under one man, the way Alexander had it. He begins now to amass gold and finances and resources throughout all the lands that he controls. Because what is he doing? He's trying to build up a military army.
Right.
During this period in history, the current king that's sitting on the Ptolemaic throne is weak. Not only is he weak, if you're familiar with some of Antiochus IV's history, he was also in jail. He was in prison at one time. And while he was in prison, he had a great relationship with the person who finally comes to be king in Egypt, so that they were friends. But this person was not as strong as him. He was much weaker. So Antiochus now believes that he can finally take over Egypt because the guy who rules it believes that Antiochus is his friend. And on top of that, he's also weak. So what does Antiochus do? He understands that although the guy might be weak, to take control of Egypt is still not going to be any small bet at all whatsoever. So what does he do? Again, he goes around and he collects silver and gold, because in the style of even American politics, before war is waged, what does the American president do? He approaches the Senate.
Right.
And what does he declare? I need money.
Mm.
I'm going to war.
Right.
It's exactly what Antiochus does, except he does it with a little bit more dictatorship, in the sense of George Bush. Remember when George Bush waltzed into the UN? He didn't ask them for the Iraq war. He said, "We going to war, and you're either with us or with the enemies." Remember that statement that was on every cover of every major newspaper in America?
Yep.
That was bold. In that same spirit, Antiochus marches throughout the regions that he controls and begins to gather silver. Now, at this point in history, Egypt still has a great relationship with Rome. So what Antiochus is forgetting is that because of the alliances that Egypt has with Rome, which is Kittim in the Bible, in the book of Daniel 11, because Egypt still has great alliances with Rome, picking a fight with Egypt is a declaration of war with Rome. Antiochus is still clinically a madman. So he still tries. We're about to see how. In 174 BC, Jason, who is pro-Greek, the former high priest, bribed Antiochus for the high priesthood from his brother Onias III, and he built a gymnasium. Hellenism was adopted by many in Israel. In 171 BC, Menelaus bought the priesthood away from Jason. Remember, the priesthood is now for hire. Ain't that something? This is really crazy. And in 169, he tries to regain control. As punishment, Antiochus pillages Jerusalem and the Jerusalem temple. But I have to give you a backdrop, because most of us are familiar with this, but the backdrop is missing. The historical context of what's going on in Egypt and Rome during this time. Remember, in the books of Daniel chapter 11, it says that the king of the north will march and advance against the king of the south. But ships of Kittim would stop him. That's Rome. Now let me give you the real history. So there's a Roman ruler, as it were, or governor, known as Aurelius. And he is a representative of the Roman Senate. He's not an emperor. He's not a king of Rome. He's just simply a representative of the Roman Senate. He's in Egypt during the time that Antiochus marches into Egypt with a legion of soldiers ready for battle. And when he does so, he's met by the then king of Egypt, as well as the head of the Roman Senate. The head of the Roman Senate is not dressed in military garb. He has on robes that Roman Senate representatives would have. He looks like an ambassador. He does not look like a general ready for war. And what he says to Antiochus is interesting. He says to him, why do you march in advance against Egypt, knowing and seeing that Rome is her greatest ally? And Antiochus says, how much does Syria have to pay Rome in order for Rome to stand down? And the Senate said, I don't think you understand me. He went around Antiochus and 5 of his top generals and drew a circle in the sand. And he came and stepped out of the circle. And he said to Antiochus, if any of you or your generals advance just 1 foot out of that circle, it will be regarded as a declaration of war against Rome. What does Antiochus do? He knows that Rome is no joke. Rome at this point is like Russia. They waiting on a fight. For those of you who are familiar with contemporary history, you should know exactly what I mean by that. Russia is ready right now. And she has many allies in the Middle East. Rome was that person at that time. She was ready for war. And she also had many allies. And Antiochus knew, as crazy as he was, he didn't want no problems with Rome. So with great shame, because I want to tell you, in the ancient world, if you advance upon a nation state with a vast army and get turned down because somebody told you stand down, you not only look weak to the people you're talking to, but you look weak to the people that came with you. That should tell you how much power Rome had. That this man, who's deemed today as a clinically insane man, wouldn't step foot out of that circle because of the fear of Rome.
He was sane when it came to Rome.
Rome put him back in his senses. Right? Mama style, slap you back into your senses. Right? So watch what begins to happen now. I want to also remind the family who's tuning in, because we're about to turn up the knowledge in a couple of moments. Family, share the live. Thumb up the video. The more people that recognize what's going on in here is the more attention we bring to this. This is our culture. This is our way of life. When we get them Migos videos, we sharing them. When we get them little baby videos, we sharing them. We need to share our culture and our history, family. Thumb up the video and share it, please, family. Let's let the truth be known out here. That's our job as Israel. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
All right. So with that being said, one of the things that is known in psychology, since we're talking about psychology, one of the so-called founding fathers of psychology today, as far as the West is concerned, Sigmund Freud, he speaks of something called descent. And what he means by that is, you ever notice that when you can't respond a certain way in the workplace, or if you know people that can't respond a certain way in the workplace because your boss is treating you a certain way and because you need the job, you can't tell him how you really feel about him. So what do those people tend to do? When they come home, their children are about to face World War III. That's why children, it's wise, make sure you are not playing when it comes to school and what you need to do around your house. You have no idea the amount of stress that your parents face on their way to work and when they get inside that job setting. We are fighting so many elements while we're there. And because we're human at the end of the day, it's human sometimes to take out your issue on someone who is weaker than you. That's human. It's not right, but it's human. So in speaking of descent, what Antiochus does, because Antiochus cannot touch Egypt because of the fear of Rome, and look at the book of Daniel 11 playing out perfectly, just as it says in the book of Daniel 11, and the king of the north approach the king of the south, Egypt. But ships of Kittim, Rome, stops him. And what does he do? Turns around and faces, and the Tanakh says, puts his eyes on the Holy Land. That's Jerusalem. That's Judea. That's the land of Israel. And that's where we're at right now. So because he can't do anything to Egypt, he takes out his rage and frustration and embarrassment on the Holy Land. This
Chief.
is why, yeah, Chief.
Do you want me to read Daniel for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know what? Let me share my screen. Since I have my
Okay.
shared screen, I want the people to see this. So I'll share my screen and open it up live, all right?
Okay, no problem.
Here we go. Thank you very much for staying there.
You are expert in this share screen game. You are expert.
Where are we? There we go. I got it. Book of Daniel. You guys are about to see my screen in a couple of seconds. And there we go. When you can see my screen, Chief, just please let me know that you can see my...
I can see it.
You can see it. Okay.
I can see it.
Hold on. I don't see it, so hold on.
You just took it away.
I just took it away? Okay,
Yeah.
let me try once more. What about now?
I see it.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go to the book of Daniel, chapter 11. I'm going to read through it very fast. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I took my stand. This is Daniel speaking. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
To strengthen and fortify him. And now I will tell you the truth. Persia will have 3 more kings, and the 4th will be wealthier than them all. By the power he obtains through his wealth, he will stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. Because remember, at this time, the kingdom of Greece is powerful. At this time, the kingdom of Greece is being led by an actual Macedonian, Philip IV, who's the father of Alexander the Great.
Yep.
And Philip IV is the one that passes the mantle, and his son eventually is the one that takes control of the then known world by taking over Persia. But the person they're speaking of in this moment is actually Philip IV.
Right.
Then a warrior king will appear who will have an extensive dominion and do as he pleases. Alexandros, the defender of men, absolutely. But after his appearance, his kingdom will be broken up and scattered to what? The 4 winds of the heaven.
Break it down,
But
Chief.
not for any of his posterity, his children, nor with dominion like that which he had, none of them control it all.
Right.
For his kingdom will be uprooted and belong to others, even besides these. So when it says scattered to the 4 winds, again, that's the Torah's allusion to Alexander's empire being broken up and divided among his 4 generals like we saw earlier.
Right.
So again, for those who wonder if the Bible is historical, check the historical record. You darn right the Bible is historical. The king of the south will grow powerful. This is the Ptolemaic Empire. However, one of his officers will overpower him in rule, having an extensive dominion. After some years, an alliance will be made. By the way, one of his officers that will overpower him, we're talking about the Seleucid Empire, which is one of the officers of Alexander, because we're still speaking of these 4 generals as still being under Alexander until eventually they rule all of Alexander's empire, where we can speak about them as a single person. After some years, an alliance will be made, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to effect the agreement. As we know in the ancient day, even as we see it play out with the life of Solomon, many great kings created alliances through marriages. By the way, that still exists today, even among notable families, no matter where you are. I want to say, even looking at the Israelite community, you can see that in the Israelite community. You can see families that are regarded as great and have great lineage in our community. Many of their children go on to marry children from other quote unquote great families within the community. So we even still see that today. She will be surrendered, excuse me. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to effect the agreement, but she will not maintain her strength, nor will his strength endure. She will be surrendered together with those who escorted her and the one who begot her and helped her during those times. So one of the daughters of the Ptolemaic kings is married now to one of the sons of the Seleucid kings. And this is done as a treaty or as an alliance. But both kings have hidden agendas because they're trying to use that moment to get closer to each other so that they can literally usurp one another's authority or throne. It comes to naught or nothing. A shoot from her stock will appear in his place, will come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north. He will fight and overpower him. He will also take their gods with their molten images and their precious vessels of silver and gold and go back to Egypt as booty. For some years, he will leave the king of the north alone. This is, I want to say, Ptolemy Sometra, which is like Ptolemy the fourth or Ptolemy the fifth. He goes into the Seleucid Empire and gives them quite a hefty beatdown. which is another reason why Antiochus has an issue with them, because just before Antiochus comes to rulership, the Ptolemaic kings are advancing towards the Seleucid Empire and they're beginning to embarrass them.
Right.
And they're doing this because Rome is backing them.
Right.
His sons will wage war, collecting a multitude of great armies. He will advance and sweep through as a flood and will again wage war, as is his stronghold. Then the king of the south, in a rage, will go out to do battle with him, with the king of the north. He will muster a great multitude, but the multitude will be delivered into the foe's power. But when the multitude is carried off, he will grow arrogant. He will cause 10,000s to perish, but will not prevail. Then the king of the north will again muster a multitude even greater than the first. After a time, a matter of years, he will advance with a great army and much baggage. In those times, many will resist the king of the north, and the lawless sons of your people will assert themselves to confirm the vision, but they will